The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, y'all. Welcome to the third session of Reproaction's Direct Action Training Series. And you can, as always, put questions in the box throughout the training. You don't have to wait until the end. What else do I want you to know? Oh yeah, and as always, like this is not meant to be like you're going to be an expert after we get through this presentation. It's meant to hopefully inspire you, give you some ideas around organizing direct actions, and give you a way to organize and structure like how you organize and the things that you consider and the ways that you go about it. So the first session was on intersectionality. If you want to go back and watch that, it is on the same page that you use to register for this training. And if you've attended any other trainings, those videos they're up on our YouTube page, but there's links to them on that resource page that you went to sign up for this. This video will also be available. The next one will also be available. So if you missed or have missed or will miss, don't worry about it. You can go check out the recording whenever you'd like. And the only, downside of that is that you don't get to ask questions when it's happening in real time, but you still get the content. So let's jump into today's training, organizing direct actions, what we've all been waiting for, right? When we talked about intersectionality and from theory to practice in the first one, about it as a concept, we talked about it, what it might look like in practice, things that we want to be thinking about. And then the last session, which was the second one, we talked about building your base, some things to consider when you're trying to recruit and mobilize, thinking critically about relationship building, and then also coalition building. And this time we're going to talk about the actual actions that you come up with, and like the strategies and tactics thinking around those two aspects of well, today we're talking more about the tactics, and the strategizing is the first two sessions. So getting into tactics today. And let's introduce myself. The voice you are hearing is IVania Woods. I am the movement building and research manager for Reproaction. I've spent the last 5 years working with Reproaction, trying to employ principles of intersectionality in all of our campaigns and all of our work. Reproaction is an organization that works to increase access to abortion and also advance reproductive justice. And so we have a variety of campaigns that we work on the ground and in the digital space. So keeping that in mind there, I've worked on increasing birth control and abortion access, addressing racial health disparities, and ending HIV criminalization, particularly in Missouri, which is where I'm located. And yeah, so I also got my PhD here in Columbia, Missouri from Mizzou, and in sociology, and studied intersectionality and social movements particularly. So my research, my teaching, and my activism are pretty much tie-in together, correlate, correspond. And so I do enjoy that I was able to work that out, and that if that's any indication of how much I love this work, there it is. And my co-presenter today is Natalie Newman.
Hi, everybody. The voice you're hearing right now is Natalie Newman. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently the executive assistant for Reproaction. Prior to joining Reproaction, I graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee with a degree in Women and Gender Studies. After graduating in 2018, I joined Reproaction as the Wisconsin organizer, where I spearheaded an initiative to end enforcement of and ultimately eliminate Wisconsin's Unborn Child Protection Act, also known as Act 292, which is a law that can be used to criminalize pregnant people who use drugs. The campaign was called the #Wisconsin Fights 292 campaign, and when that campaign came to a close in 2021, I transitioned to my role as executive assistant, and I've been with Reproaction for 4 years now. I'll be co-presenting on this webinar to talk about how to organize direct actions and my experience as an organizer on the ground in Wisconsin. So today's objectives, will be talking about choosing to act, types of direct actions, organizing and co-organizing, suggestions and advice, and then we'll end with an audience Q&A. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now we'll discuss choosing to act. Even before choosing to act, the first step is to identify and solidify what your end goal is. These are some questions that I like to ask myself, like, what exactly do you want to accomplish? Who will help you accomplish this? Are there people in your community already doing that work? If so, how can you help or how can you collaborate, which IVania will talk about later. You can also ask yourself, do you have different goals? If so, how do they differ? And how can we use the tools we already have to reach our goals? You want to make sure to get really specific with your goals. It's easy to say we want X, Y, Z without having the details, the nitty-gritty figured out. Plan ahead, make sure you have your asks and preferred outcome lined up so you always know what your goals are and what you're pushing towards, and thus how direct action will help you achieve these goals. When I was organizing, I put everything down on a pretty loose timeline so that I could know exactly when I wanted something accomplished. This timeline was in no way absolute, but it helps planning out the steps to get to an end goal. After you've identified your goal, you'll want to, 1, identify the person or people in power who can adequately address the issue. This could be a politician, a company or organization, a legislature, a place, or something along those lines. You want to ask yourself, how can these people take action to meet your goal? Is this an issue where your legislation could help solve the problem? Is this a community-based issue where members of the community could push this forward? Who, and this could be one person or multiple people, is best equipped to tackle this and work collaboratively? You also want to ask, who would be most privy to this issue? Is someone in a position of power already working on it? And are there opponents to your goal, and who are they? Think about the many different ways to address your goal. What are those ways? Think about your issue from different angles and think through who can adequately address the issue. It may be an organization, a person, a group of people, or it could be all three, so make sure you know who can actually move that needle. Then, once you've identified people in power who can address the issue, give them an opportunity to address the issue. Do some research to see if the person or people you've identified have addressed the issue before. In the case of Wisconsin's Women Child Protection Act, Wisconsin's Attorney General had already taken up the issue in years past, so I knew that contacting him or someone in his office would probably be better than trying to go and contact someone in the governor's office right away. The Wisconsin campaign was created in partnership with National Advocates for Pregnant Women, also known as NAPW, and they got a contact in office that they could send information to, so then my goal became to get in with the governor. After this, you'll want to try to set up a meeting, a phone call, or something like that in person with the person in power to talk about the issue. Sorry, I didn't mean to say in person. It does not have to be in person. Like I said, it could be a phone call or something like that. It can be hard though, especially if the person you've identified is pretty high profile, like the governor of a state or the president of an organization. If you can't set up a meeting or phone call with the person directly, try to get on their assistant's or even their advisor's schedule. I've had luck in the past getting the information of a policy advisor for Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers, and I was able to set up a 20-minute meeting with him, which is very hard to do since most politicians and their staff won't really give you the time of day and they kind of just want to get you out the door. You'll also want to bring stakeholders into the meeting that will back you up and bring different perspectives on the issue you want to address. This can be done by having stakeholders sign into a letter you wrote explaining the issue and presenting it during the meeting, having them sign into a position you present, or something like that. Having these different perspectives will demonstrate how important the issue is, and having people there, physically or otherwise, that have your back will make this meeting seem a little less daunting and more urgent. You'll also want to bring materials on the issue to your meeting so that the person or people can reference them later when the meeting is over. I made sure to bring along our informational leaflets from the Wisconsin Fights 292 campaign and my own business card to distribute for future reference. When introducing yourself and your issue, you can also start by sending concise but informative emails about the issue to the person you're trying to get in contact with. Make sure to include links and other relevant information in case you're not able to connect with someone immediately. This gives them the time to look over your material since all the information is literally right there and reply back to you. Make sure to follow up after the meeting or phone call, thanking the person for their time and sending over appropriate links and other info. You can also use this opportunity to connect folks on the issue at hand. And number 3, if they deny there is an issue or refuse to adequately address the issue, then direct action is needed. Try to address the issue from multiple different angles and outlets prior to choosing direct action to ensure that you've covered all your bases. Direct action does not have to be used as the last resort. However, if you've identified and reached out to people in power who can address the issue and you've given them ample opportunity to address the issue and they refuse or ignore you, then direct action is necessary. When I was running the Wisconsin Fights 292 campaign, we called on Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers to end enforcement of and eliminate Wisconsin's Act 292 by publicizing our ask, elevating our ask, and getting in contact with someone in power that could do something. We knew going into the campaign that the governor could only do so much. The law, Act 292, was ruled unconstitutional, but was kept in place due to the efforts of former Governor Scott Walker and his Attorney General. So demanding that Governor Evers order district attorneys to stop pursuing cases under Act 292 was the way that we could demand action from him. When Governor Evers did not act, we moved on to different tactics. We also knew that for this specific campaign, criminalization of pregnant people was and is happening behind closed doors and in secrecy. So we knew that we had to do grassroots organizing and outreach to reach the people most at risk for enforcement, like people of color, low-income people, and people who use drugs. This campaign was born from direct action tactics, and again, we wanted to ensure that direct action was a focal point of this campaign to get the word out to people who are at risk. Because oftentimes you don't really know about Act 292 until it happens to you or someone you know. The court proceedings are held in secrecy behind closed doors in juvenile court, so a direct action campaign was the best option for getting the word out. For example, this started with picketing and leaflet drops for this campaign. The way that we did this was that I kind of scoped out possible places to picket, like drug treatment centers and hospitals, learned their hours and their busiest times, and then I would go to these places with informational leaflets and hand them out to people that were leaving treatment. We also attached free pregnancy tests to the leaflets so that folks walk away with both information and resources in case something were to come up. I would also engage folks in conversation if they seem interested and try to give them a very quick, like 5 to 10 seconds spiel on the issue. The leaflet drops that I would do would be at hospitals, WIC, which are women, infant, and children offices, drug treatment centers, free and low-cost prenatal care providers, basically anywhere that I thought people would go to when seeking information or help. We try to do this in hopes that if someone were seeking help for drug treatment while pregnant, they would run into this information and have the tools to take action to protect themselves. So now that I've gone over when direct action is needed, I will pass it back to IVania to talk about planning your direct action and everything that goes into it.
All right, thank you so very much for the amount of detail. And just to reiterate to the people, for people who missed that point, you want to leave room for escalation, right? Like choosing direct action, like Natalie said, it doesn't have to be the last option, but you do want to give the people in power that you want to move differently, to choose differently, to act differently, right? You want to give them an opportunity to do that and leave room for escalation. And I'll talk about that even more like when we get into the suggestions and advice that we'll get into a little bit later. But first I want to talk about types of direct actions. And the goal here is to choose the most effective approach. We look to the civil rights movement as the model of direct action. And that's sweet and all, but looking backwards is fine. But I really want people to think about looking forward per se, not that, progress is a linear or straight line, right? You want to leave room for innovation and creativity. The reason why the civil rights movement was so effective was because it was fresh at the time. It was innovative at the time. But keep in mind that systems of oppression adapt. So for people now who feel like marching doesn't work, protesting doesn't work. And there is some truth to that, because the systems of oppression that we live under are they've come to expect it, right? So sometimes it's still effective, but you have to think a little bit more critically when you're strategizing what is going to be most effective for what you're doing. And also leave room again for escalation. All right, so when choosing the most effective approach, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I've divided these up, because if you're looking at the screen, you're like, what do we have here? Okay, so the first point I wanted to make is the distinction between civil disobedience and nonviolent direct action. A lot of people who may not organize regularly tend to throw these two in together and think that all of this is direct action, and it is direct action, but there are some significant differences and some things you want to consider when deciding if you're going to go the civil disobedience route, or if you're going to go what I have labeled here as the in-person action route, but it's more so nonviolent direct action, which is really all the rest of these, right? So civil disobedience, of course, is when, by definition, you're breaking the law to bring attention to an issue. So if it is illegal, to stand to drink, well, I don't want to use a historical example. I was going to say to drink from a white water fountain, or to sit in the front of the bus. All of these things we know, but like currently, it can be illegal to block the highway, for instance, to prevent traffic from going. That's civil disobedience. You can get arrested doing that type of action, right? And there's things that you want to consider going into that, which we'll talk about here in a sec. Just let me get through this really quickly, or my version of really quickly. And then for nonviolent direct action, there's agreement and there's an understanding that we're going out, we're taking it to the streets, or we're going to do this specifically because we don't want to get arrested. We want everybody to be okay, to go home, and we're not trying to escalate this in a way where people get arrested and go to jail and those things. But I'll get into more of like detailing what that is, because right now we're just talking about types, right? Not actually employing them, just types, right? So there's many ways, though, to act and persuade people, or at the very least, to get them to think more critically about issues. So that's where we are here. We can have in-person, we can have all of these civil disobedience, in-person actions, digital campaigns. We can use our voice, we can use our pens, and even through art. But even though I have 6 categories here, there's so many more. Like if you Google direct actions, you're going to get a ton of things that pop up. But for the most part, people think solely about marching and rallying, when I want you to expand how you think about direct actions, okay? Particularly nonviolent direct action. So sometimes I've been at actions where people show up and they're like, this isn't enough. We need to be doing more. And I'm like, that's cool. So you should be attending the meetings. You should be at the table to express those feelings. Don't wait until you get to the action to criticize and vocalize what you think it should be. When we're planning the action, that's the time for that. Now that you're here, let's do what we are here to do. And we can think about how we want to change up for the next action or the actions that follow. So yeah, there's that. All right, and so in-person actions that can also be turn into civil disobedience. So there's kind of like that fine line, right? So something that you could be breaking the law with civil disobedience, but you may not get arrested if the police arrive and they ask you to leave, to stop, and you leave and stop. By definition, you have participated in civil disobedience, but you didn't get arrested because you stopped your action when you were asked by authorities to stop your action. So there's like, that's where the nonviolent direct action would be defined right there on that line. If you decided to stay, it would be civil disobedience. You're going to get arrested in that direction. It would still be civil disobedience, but be nonviolent direct action as well if you left. So in-person actions can look like sit-ins, die-ins, marches, rallies, boycotts, which I didn't put boycott on here because I was torn. Like, you boycotting is, you're not in person, right? And the way that I divided this up, it wouldn't fit. But I want to just give it an honorable mention that it is something you can physically not do that should be noted. And there's digital campaigns that, I mean, prior to the internet, and particularly prior to social media, this couldn't even be a thing because it wasn't a thing, right? Like, people weren't online, losing their lives to these social media apps. But now as you've seen, like, that there's an innovation that happened with organizing where you can do it online now. And people will say, oh, look at these keyboard warriors. And it's like, all right, but it can be effective in its own ways. I don't have like a high bar for it because a lot of people, the thing about social media apps is that you construct it to feed into what you already believe. If something seeps through the cracks, and from what I know about affect control, you're going to resist, right? You're going to dig even deeper into what you believe when someone comes at you with contradictory information. And so myself, I'm talking about like people, particularly on Facebook, and how when emotions can get high around issues, there might be fights in the comments. And it's like, I don't do that. Like, if you don't agree with me, you can keep it moving because I'm going to delete your comment. I'm not going to argue with you. But especially when a lot of these arguments are happening around people's humanity. So that's not my thing. But digital campaigns are different than arguments on Facebook or trying to convince people in those tedious, meticulous ways. That digital campaigns they involve calls to action, where you're asking people to do a specific thing. Write your senator, write your congressperson, write your reps, leave a comment here for a specific law that's going to be changed or has been changed to provide feedback. Retweet this, right? Share this post, asking them to do those types of things. In sending emails, informing people, educating people, text messages, being on social media and using your account for those purposes to inform people. So it's more about educating in that realm, starting a blog, making videos. A lot of learning is happening over on TikTok, to the point where like TikTok videos, I don't even have a TikTok account because I don't feel like I need one, because TikTok videos are shared on every single other social media platform. And so I'm like, I don't need to filter through the garbage. It seems to be doing a good job, I think, in filtering through to me the things that are worth seeing. So you can also start a podcast informing people, or have webinars like this one, right? Where you're educating people and letting them know, and this is all digital. You can get this information from wherever you are, right on your laptop, and it's helping you to plan direct actions, right? You can use your voice. And using your voice, I want to say too, is like, you can do it by lobbying, which is what testifying at hearings is, one of the aspects of lobbying that you can do. So there's congressional hearings that can happen at the state level and also at the federal level. The federal level, though, there's way more restrictions on who can attend and who gets time to speak. Those are the ones that you probably most likely, unless you just do not watch TV at all, have seen on TV at some point, or even in films, those congressional hearings that happen on the federal level. But at the state level, I know specifically here in Missouri, I only have experience in Missouri because every state their sessions go through a different length of time. They start at different times of the year, end at different times of the year, or maybe they only meet every 2 years. Like, it just depends on the state that you're in for how many opportunities that you get, what the rules are for being able to testify. But here in Missouri, and through since COVID, and I don't know what this next session is going to look like when we start up next year, but and our sessions go from like January, like mid-January to the end of May, beginning of June. And you could submit written testimonies, but you can also show up in person. And they do manipulate that to weaponize it against citizens that want to go to the state capitol to testify for or against certain bills. So that is a way you can do that. You can also meet with your representatives. And sometimes, well, most of the time, you're not going to meet with the representative. You're going to meet with someone on their team or with a portion of their team. So when I've gone to the federal government or Congress or senator at the federal level, I've gone many times. I have never met with an actual representative. What you tend to meet with is they have different teams of people, like their policy team, legislative team, depending on what the issue is. You make an appointment, you get put on their schedule, they tell you when you can come, and you go and you sit and chat with them about what you want to chat with them about. And that's not something you necessarily, like Natalie said, have to do as an individual. You can bring a team with you. Everybody has their talking points. And that gets us into the next item, which is share your story. And I found something very helpful when in those spaces is to have someone on hand who can share their story directly with that team. Sharing stories is so powerful. You can do it at rallies. You can do it, in public settings. It doesn't have to necessarily look like you verbally talking, giving a speech. It can carry over to use your pen where you're sharing it on paper and writing it down, or through digital campaigns where you're putting that out in the digital space or putting that out in the written space, newspapers, magazines, blog posts, all of that, sharing your story publicly so that people can see what that looks like. They can understand better the nuances and the complexities of what's happening, because particularly when talking about reproductive work, people tend to think that there's like, they have this idea of who gets abortions, and it's being constructed by the anti-abortion movement, instead of understanding like the complexities and nuances, particularly people who have never gotten abortions. And I'll dare to say, people who have not and think they don't know someone who has. You can also sign public statements like Natalie got into. That is a really good way of using your voice, putting your name to a letter going out that's targeting a person in power who has the authority to change what you want changed. So using your pen, of course, incorporated in there. Write an LTE to your local paper. LTEs are really for local papers, whether they are digital local or if they are national papers or what have you. Like if they are like a national, like the New York Times. If me, IVania, I'm not going to get published. My LTE is not going to get published in the New York Times. I know that. Hopefully you know that, unless you are a high profile person, because New York Times is a high profile paper. But I want to emphasize that a lot of the changes we want to see, the ones that impact us the most directly, happen at the local level. So you don't always have to be thinking nationally or big or, in that way. And then, blog posts, again, websites, write a book. That's also a way to share your story. And then, of course, there's art. Art has been a part of movements, social movements, always, throughout. Paintings, comics, dancing, film, sculptures, graffiti, music, skits, and are used to make statements and also to get people to think more critically about what is happening. So when you're thinking about types of direct actions, just know that you're not limited to protests and marches or, handcuffing yourself to a door or a tree or what have you. Like, there's so many ways. So think about your talents and how you can maximize those talents in movement spaces, and also uh, like what you can contribute and contribute well. Okay, because we're all multifaceted, and what you could do does not necessarily mean you should do. Like, what are your strengths? Consider those, and where you want to plug in at, and then also think about again who that person in power is, and leave room for escalation. So you don't want to shoot straight to civil disobedience. You don't want to go straight to people getting arrested. You want to give them build up, leave yourself room to escalate, right? Because if you start at the top and then it's like, where do you go from there? What do you do? What do you do? Right? Um, and then think about like what you have access to. Like people in prison, hunger strikes are a popular means. They don't start with hunger strikes though, right? But it gets to that point because they don't have power in prison, and that's why they turn to hunger strikes so often, because it's something that they can do, and it has been effective throughout time. But if everybody just, I don't like this, so I'm going on a hunger strike, and everybody was going on hunger strike, it wouldn't have the power that it has to change people's minds and hearts. All right, so you want to decide if you're organizing solo or if you're co-organizing. And Natalie talked about this, so I'm not going to really dig into this that much. But what I do want to say is that you want to make sure that you have representation at the planning table. That means race, gender, sex, ability, class. Get as much diversity as you can in all the realms at the table. People who are diverse, so that the what they bring, or what we all bring, is our vantage point to a situation. So if everybody at the table looks like you, is just like you, there's no, like, you're not going to get much variation. So you want to have that, because you're going to miss things. The popular one that really, an example I used to use when I taught, was asking the class, like, what could the campus do to be more accessible for people with disabilities? And it's, if you're in a room full of people who do not have disabilities, mostly what you're going to get are people suggesting things that make it physically accessible, specifically for people who use wheelchairs. And I'm like, if you have good intentions, that's not a question, but your intentions aren't enough, because there's no one in here with disabilities who can speak to what they need and what they know their friends need and what other people with disabilities need, right? And so you only thought about people in wheelchairs, but you didn't think about people with invisible disabilities. You didn't think about different physical disabilities, right? And it is very limiting in that way. So you want to get the most diversity, because people will be able to think about things from angles that you will not think of. The complexity of the action matters. Are you going to have an inside team and an outside team? Inside being they're there delivering a letter, or they're there demanding the person that they talk to come out and talk to the people who are outside. Or maybe they're inside participating in a die-in and disrupting business, but the people outside have the bullhorns, or sharing stories, are getting people's attention who are walking by, doing handouts. Like, there can be different aspects of an action. It's a matter of what you want to do with this time. And the size of the action, of course, matters in regards to how many people you have to wrangle up. Because if you're the only person organizing, but you have announced this publicly, and 100 people show up and they're like, who do I talk to about this, this, and this? And you're the only person that those 100 people can talk to, you can guarantee your action is going to look a lot different than you thought it was, because you do not have enough people on hand to handle all these questions, do all the things that you wanted to do. So keep that in mind. So suggestions and advice. Your goal here, my goal for you, is to have a well-organized and executed action. So these are suggestions and advice coming from me directly, right? You want to avoid stepping on toes. Okay, what I mean by this, I often say this, 95% of my job is managing egos, okay? You want to co-organize with and seek out co-sponsorships from or include community leaders who have and are primarily worked on an issue. Natalie mentions this. I want to emphasize, reiterate, I can't iterate it enough, okay? Cannot emphasize it enough. Do not jump up if you have not been working on an issue, even if you've worked on other issues and you're known for working on other issues. If you want to dabble into something else, go find the community leaders that are already working on that, because people are working on that. I know on social media it's popular. Why is no one talking about this? Why is no one doing theirs? Always. Someone talking about it, somebody working on it. Find those people, link up with those people, link up with those organizations. Recruit or designate speakers and writers. So you want to provide clear guidelines and expectations to the people who are going to be speaking at your event. And if you are setting up like a group writing session for LTEs, like it doesn't have to be you individually writing the LTEs. You could be there giving people's ideas or providing templates. And then if it so happens where you want to help, like get your neighbors, get your community involved, you can set up a time all y'all can get together. You can also write. It doesn't mean like you give an instruction and you can't write. You can definitely write. But you want to provide clear guidelines. What are y'all doing? What newspapers or sources are y'all going to submit this to? And then you want to provide clear topics and the time that allotted for it. So if they're going up to speak at a rally, you want to make sure they know what they are going up there to speak about, what confines they're in, how much time they have, and how serious you are about them tending to that time, right? Where somebody's going to be holding up a card if it's a panel or something, right? Letting you know you got 2 minutes. You got 2 minutes. I'm going to let you know it's 60 seconds, and I'm going to let you know when your time is up, and I'm going to need you to wrap it up, right? Because people get nervous, and also your energy's flowing through you when you're on stage. You get really hype, and sometimes time can escape you. It happens to the best of us. And also let them know who's going to be in the audience. If someone's coming to speak to, your class or at your event for nurses, right? Or your event for, let them know who can they expect to be in the audience. It's not something the speaker should have to ask you. That's information you should be providing, right? Safety and security. This is, and I'm giving these and trying to get you to think about it, not just for protests and rallies and things. There's so many things we'll be thinking about this. Safety and security, though, specifically for rallies, marches, in-person actions, assign marshals and police liaisons. Marshals are the people that make sure people are staying in the vicinity they're supposed to stay in. They're the people making sure they're not talking to press if that is not what they're supposed to be doing, that they're not talking to the police if that is not what they're supposed to be doing. If y'all did not get a permit to be here and you're not here to get arrested, make sure they're staying on the sidewalks because that is public space, can't be in the street, right? Make sure that they're crossing the street safely. You would be surprised the energy some people bring to organized actions, especially when you open them up to the public and you're like, these organizations are co-organizing this, but we want you to show up. People will come to group activities as if they are their own individual person. They want to stand out. They want to do their own thing. And it's like, that's not the energy that you bring in a collective space that is organized collectively for the collective. You know what I mean? So those marshals are going to be, look, you need them, okay? Police liaisons are the people you designate to talk to the police. I recommend getting reverends and pastors, preachers. Listen, once that collar going around their neck, police, they're going to have a little bit of reverence and not be so reckless with them. Hopefully, from my experience, that tends to work. But you want to have people who know what they're there to do. And those people usually work really well, especially if they're community leaders that are recognizable. That people, even the police will look at them and know, like, okay, this is so-and-so. And the next point is to make sure that all of these people that you're designating, people who talk to the press, marshals, police liaisons, that they're easily identifiable, either by a band around their arm. They all have the same color t-shirt, the same color hat. that people who are participating in the action, so if the police comes up to me and I am not the police liaison for this action and they want to know who they can talk to, I can look left, look right. There's a red hat. That person right there is the person you want to talk to, right? And it could be more than one person that you have designated. You want to go over your plan with participants. I'm not seeing as much of this these days, but back when I started organizing, it was, well, that's because now, like, we're at this heightened moment where more novices are popping up, and that's fabulous. That's great. Like, I'm not critical in that aspect at all. But when I came in, I was organizing under people who had been doing organizing for like 10, 20, 30, some 40 years, right? So you would go over the plan with participants, like, tomorrow we're going here, we're doing this, and here's plan one. This team's going over here, this team's going over there. Like, I've been involved in some pretty big actions that have multiple aspects. And so thinking about that, right? Beforehand, if you can, especially with the leaders. All right, we're marching here at this time. We're going to be here for this long, especially if it's multiple locations and multiple actions happening, like, be having that on the go. You also want to have an agreement on whether you're going to do civil disobedience and a plan for it. So if you're going out and people are getting arrested, do we have bail money? Do we have lawyers on standby? We do not, even if these people are getting arrested, want them to have to stay there long. I went to an action in Jeff City. It depends on the location of your action, too, for how aggressive the police are. But you should have a pretty good idea of that. In DC, they're so used to people protesting that the police will just show up and be like, all right, y'all, how much longer y'all gonna be here? So it's like all the time. I went to an action for the people who are from Missouri down in Jeff City, and they set up shop right out in the street. They were fingerprinting people right there and was like, okay, bye. Like, you're gonna get your court date later. Like, we're not arresting you and we're not taking you nowhere. We're arresting you, quote unquote, but like, handcuffs were never put on. It was just like, here's the steps. All right, get your name, info. All right, you're gonna get your letter in the mail to let you know when you need to show up for court. Media coverage, send out those press advisories before the action happens to whatever media you think should show up. There's plenty of templates you can get for how to write a press advisory. The press release usually comes, it can come before the action too, but it's usually after the action, okay? Where you're talking of not telling people what's going to happen, but you're reviewing what did happen. You may put a couple quotes in there from people who were at the action, and you send it into the stores, and it's like they can publish what you've sent them. The press advisory is letting the press know this is happening here at this time. Show up, give us some coverage. And like I said, assign a media spokesperson. Everybody don't need to speak to the media, even if they showing up and they hype, like, let them know, hey, we got people on that, right? So thinking about chants, props, and mood, you want to prepare a chant list before the action. If you're going out to protest and picket somewhere, you want to make sure those chants are good. The beat of those chants, the tempo of those chants, okay? Determine how to get and who will be responsible for keeping up with your props. If you got bullhorns, if you got speakers, mics, things like that, and you're outside, the signs, okay? You want to make sure that you have people on that. Who's going to collect the signs when this action is over? Who's going to be responsible for making sure the mic and the speakers get put up, get back to where they're supposed to be, have those people on hand. And then last but certainly not least here is set the appropriate tempo. Right? What I mean by mood is this a solemn action? Is this a hype? What's the energy level you want people to have at this action? If you want people hype, you know what I'm saying? Then we hype. The energy level needs to be high. You want chants that are just like, they're hitting, right? You can bring in instruments, have people on drums, have, music playing. If it's more of like a vigil, you might not be doing all that. You got your candles lit. We might have people singing some slow songs that are spiritual songs and doing it that way. So just consider, like, what energy do you want at this action? That's something that people don't necessarily think about. Think about that. What energy do you want people to have at this action? And then with recruiting participants at the action, Okay, people who are going to step up and be in leadership roles for the next action or the following actions, or not even just for actions, but within your organization or your group, right? So you want to have sign-up sheets. Like have people going through the audience at your rally with sign-up sheets so you can get people's emails or social media handles if you want those, addresses if you need those, depending on what you want to do with their information. And you can let people know when they're signing, fill in whatever information you want us to have. You can do that. I don't do that. I let people decide because there's a level, a little soft coercion. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Where you hand it to them, they're going to fill it out because there's a space for it. For those people who ask you, who give you pushback, who are like, what you need my address for? You can be like, well, you don't have to put your address. Your email's good. Or, put your zip code at least down. That would be great. And that. All right. So you can also include how they can get involved on handouts that you hand out. Like, what information do you want people to walk away with from your action? And if it's a panel discussion in person or not, like this webinar at the end, it's like, what do I want y'all to do? I want y'all to follow Reproaction and get more involved with us. So I'm going to give you some ways to do that. But at any action, regardless of what the action is, if there are participants coming in, you want to give them a way to get involved with your group organization, or like give them ways to stay active. If they showed up, clearly they're looking for that. You get people to physically show up in particular, like give them a way, okay? And then this probably should have been on a voice stepping on toes, but it's here. Include time to discuss the sponsors and co-organizers in your action. Shout people out. Let people know who the co-sponsors are. Let people know what organizations are part of this. Help plan the action and get you the resources you needed to put on the action. All right, so that's all I have for you today regarding organizing direct actions. We're going to get into some Q&A here in a second. The next session is Thursday, September 8th. It is at the same time, right? Action's over. Now what, right? The goal there is to continue building momentum. And in that training, we'll discuss what and how to debrief with participants of an action, using the action as a learning mechanism, and how to get new participants to return, and how you can bring more attention to the action when it's over. And like I said, follow Reproaction on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Our handles at Reproaction on all of them. You can email us at reproaction@reproaction.org. Any questions or comments that you might have, or inquiries that you may have. You can also visit our website for information on all of our campaigns, find our resources. Of the utmost importance right now, we're really pushing is our self-managed abortion with pills campaign. So definitely look into that, look out for that. And you can go to reproaction.org for that. If you want to know how to keep up with our work, then you can go to our website, reproaction.org, get on our listserv and stay up on what's happening, what we're doing, upcoming things, what we've done. It's love over there. So do that. So we got about 12 minutes for Q&A. And I see that we do have, what's happening? If I can figure out how to make this big, I will do it. And I can't. I don't know what I did wrong. Let's see here. Oh, Lord. Questions. Oh, I see it. Oh, geez. Nope. Didn't work. Okay, well, I'll look at it small. Give me a second because I got to read it. It's tiny. Okay, there's a comment here about the effectiveness of talking to your local representatives, particularly about reproductive issues. And I do feel like that is a poignant point. if your objective is to get representatives to address things. Absolutely. All right. So no questions, and absolutely no pressure to ask questions. But if you do have questions, now's the time, or I'm going to let you get back these last 10 minutes so that you can get on with your day. And I want to apologize for if this felt rushed, if you felt like you had to, if we were going quickly, but a lot of information to pack into an hour, really more like 45, 50 minutes. All right, so no questions, great. If you do end up having questions for me, then email reproaction@reproaction.org. The other thing I want to say is thank y'all for coming. Thank y'all for showing up. Me and Natalie, or Natalie and I, we appreciate you for taking time out of your Thursday morning or afternoon, depending on the time zone you're in. And hopefully you come back for the last session, which is the Thursday after Labor Day. All right. And we will see you then. So thank y'all and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks, IVania. Bye.